Hi, welcome everyone. So glad to have you with us today. It's some of you, this is morning, some of you, this is afternoon, this might be evening for some of you. My name is Nicole Parker. I'm the Assistant Dean for Field Education at the Jack Joseph Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. And you are here for the Field Instructor, Task Supervisor, Field Instructor Training. Promoting anti-oppression, diversity, equity, and inclusion in field education. Thanks so much for being with us and sharing the next 2 hours of your time with us today. My colleague and I, Dr. Adrienne Fletcher, are so happy to have you here with us. I'd like to introduce Dr. Adrienne Fletcher. She is the Assistant Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, and she also is the new director, this is really cool, the new director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for the Supreme Court of Ohio. So that's really, really a great new opportunity that she has going on right now. So we're pleased to have you with us today. We also have a new dean, and so he might be popping in. If he's able to join us today, we have Dean Voisin, who has joined our school just a few months ago. So if he pops in, we'll make sure to introduce you to him as well.
I'm already on the call, Nicole.
Oh, you are? I'm sorry, I can't see my screen. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you are very busy and you've got a packed schedule. So thanks so much for taking the time and the opportunity to be here today with our field instructors and our task supervisors. So I know you want to give a warm welcome for our training today. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining this call. As Nicole said, my name is Dexter Voisin, and I joined the faculty as Dean on January 1st this year. We know that social work is not only an incredibly powerful profession that's dealing with social and racial inequalities externally, but in the words of Audre Lorde, where she's really sort of encouraged all of us to confront not just the oppressor on the outside, but a little piece of the oppressor that lives in all of us. And we know that our profession, as socially justed minded as it has a complicated past, and it's also been involved in replicating harm to marginalized poor individuals and racialized individuals. And, so I applaud all of the folks who are on this call this afternoon. And we know that this is important work, it's personal work, and it's critical work. I can tell you as a Black male, I am continuing to do the work in terms of ways that I have replicated colonial ideologies in my practice, in my research, in my administration. Listen, let's be real with all of each other and support each other. We are all socialized to colonial ideologies. We are all socialized to racist ideologies. We are all socialized to ideologies that privilege male identities. So this work is so importantly critical as we do this work both individually, but look at this work across of our social work institutions, organizations, and structures. So I'm going to stay on as long as I can and just applaud all of you on this call and learn alongside all of you as we take part in this 2-hour schedule. So again, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher, for leading this conversation. And thank you, all of you, for not only learning, but teaching as you learn, as we all figure this out collectively. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. We hope that this is going to be an interactive session that we can learn alongside of each other. You all bring a different level of expertise, and you all bring a lot of knowledge to the space. So we're hoping to learn from one another here. So the next slide, this is going to be an interactive session. So you can advance to the next slide. Looking at the slide, what do you see? Go ahead and put in the chat, how many logs do you see? Go ahead and write a number in. 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. So 4, 4, 3. Okay, so you see the point here, right? So we're all looking at the same image. We're all looking at the same image and we see something different. Some see 3 logs, some see 4 logs. So let's give ourselves permission to see things differently. We're all looking at the same image and we're seeing things differently. And our students, of course, are going to see things differently too. So we all can agree that we're going to see things differently. Let's give our permission during this training and beyond to be able to see things differently. Our objectives today is we're going to identify strategies to support students' development as anti-oppressive, anti-racist social work practitioners in field education. We're going to define student and field instructor roles in supervisory relationships, increase capacity for ongoing self-awareness and reflexivity, apply engagement strategies in racially equitable, socially just, culturally responsive fashion to promote student learning in a safe and inclusive environment. And we're going to cultivate academic belonging in field education. So we're going to spend the next 2 hours together. We've already talked about that. You can advance to the next slide, please. And actually the next one. So the overall arching goal that as I was thinking about this presentation and preparing for it, the term academic belonging kept on popping into my head. And as much as I was trying to kind of move away from it, it just kept on coming back. So really the overall arching goal that we are thinking about is really trying to cultivate this academic belonging in field education. So that means really cultivating students' sense of connection to the field placement, to the social work role, to the profession, to the organization, and to the community. And when we apply an equity-focused lens to academic belonging, this means as field instructors, maybe we're defining patterns of inequity that impact that sense of belonging in a negative way within our organizations. Maybe it's applying an equity lens. Maybe an equity lens means applying or paying attention to the patterns in our organizations and intentionally creating new pathways for students to contribute and engage. And not just having students contribute, but actually legitimately having their input validated within your organization. We had a student, a Muslim student, who needed a place to pray several times during the day during his field education. And there wasn't, within his organization, there wasn't a place, a quiet, safe place for him to do that. And he kept advocating and advocating. And finally, he was able to, with the work of his field instructor, task supervisor, and some of the other people within his organization, they were able to create a room, a prayer room for all different religions, for a place for people to pray and a safe place for people to pray during the day. So that is one way that a student's knowledge was validated, created a sense of belonging for students and everybody in the organization, and an example of a way that created a new pathway for our student. So we were going to look at everybody who was in the room here, and I was going to ask everybody to say your name and your organization and your current role, but since we have a large group here, we are going to go to a poll instead. And so at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, we have 3 different program formats. We have the online program, we have an intensive weekend format, and we have an on-campus weekly format. So go ahead and just select which format you supervise students in. And while you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and introduce you to our field education team.
Lori,
Actually,
last pager. Oh, you was just.
Actually, sorry, I'm going to actually wait until, because we can't advance the slide. So I'm going to wait a minute until we get the results from the poll. Okay. We'll give it just another minute, another couple seconds here. Okay, we can go ahead and end the poll and show the results.
Can you see the results?
Well, it says,
Not yet.
Yeah, I shared the results from my screen.
a couple people still participating.
Well, it looks like we have about 70% from the on-campus weekly. We have 9% intensive weekend, and we have 20% in the online program. So that's who we have in the room. So next slide, please. So I wanted to, next slide. Wanted to introduce you to our amazing team that we have here. We have, this is our on-campus and online team. We have Adusu Bailey. Go ahead, Adusu, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you today. My name is Adusu Bailey. I work as field faculty advisor at Mandel School, and I primarily work with on-campus students.
Okay, great. And Henrietta?
I am Henrietta Jones. I'm the administrative assistant in field education, and today I'm taking attendance.
Thank you, Lori.
Hi, Lori Lungs Painter. I'm director of the intensive weekend format and field faculty advisor for those students in intensive weekend.
Thank you. Angela?
Hello, I'm Angela Wooden. I'm a field faculty advisor. I work with the on-campus weekly and intensive weekend students.
Thank you. Susan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Snyder. I work in the online program, and I am located in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you, Jody. Jody is our online field faculty advisor, and I saw she was on, so can't see my screen here. And then we have Shinobia Webster, who is also our online field faculty advisor, and myself. We also do have, I have to just have a shameless plug here. We do have an on-campus field faculty advisor position available that is will be posted for one more week. So if anybody is interested in that position, please check out our website for that position. So I want to talk about why are we here today? Why is this important? Why is promoting anti-oppression, diversity, equity, and inclusion in field education important? Besides all of the obvious reasons, our accrediting body also agrees that this is important. Our EPAS the final draft is expected to come out next month. And some major changes that impact field education is that there's going to be a curricular emphasis on racial justice and anti-racist and anti-oppressive social work practice. There's going to be a focus more on the intersection of injustice, both locally and globally as well. In addition to that, you all know that we have an ethical responsibility outlined in our code of ethics, and it's a part of our social work competencies, number 2, specifically engaging diversity and differences in practice. So one of my favorite quotes here is from Maya Angelou. You all know her, civil rights activist, poet, and award-winning author. And she says, I did what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. And so the reason why I put this quote in here today is because Dr. Fletcher and I recognize that you bring a ton of knowledge to this space and you bring a lot of expertise. And as Dean said earlier, we want to share your knowledge together and we want to learn from one another. This is how this work is never done. Diversity and inclusion is something that we all continue to learn from one another, and it's lifelong work. It's never going to be done. So we hope that we can learn from one another and create synergy within this space today. In order to achieve academic belonging in field education, we need to first define the roles of the students and the field instructors. And so what I want to bring your attention to is some of the words that are highlighted in red. And so looking at the words field supervision, collaborate, development of the learning agreement, the field conference, communication, addressing concern, what are all of these words representative of? Does anybody have any ideas? They're all forms of what? Who's going to be the brave soul? Learning, communication, right? Okay, so also forms of learning, communication, engagement, right? So these are all collaboration, right? So these are all ways that you are going to be communicating and engaging with students. So when we talk about different ways of practicing and engaging with our students, I want you to think about all of these different ways that you can implement these things into your engagement with students. Also, some other roles for the field instructor during the orientation process, when you're assessing students, when you're maintaining open dialogue, when you're collaborating with students, during the shadowing and observation period with students, and also, most importantly, with your 60 to 90 minute of dedicated field instruction time with your students each week. So this next slide is applying equity-focused strategies in field education. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but I just want you to start thinking about these 4 specific areas. So thinking about the placement process and the interview process, orientation or onboarding, time spent with your student during supervision, and the evaluation and assessment period. Whichever speaks most to you and how you can apply some of these strategies that Dr. Fletcher and I will be discussing later in the training, I want you to think about one or all of these areas. And I know at least one of you are thinking, wait, I'm not a teacher. I'm not teaching, but you actually are teaching, because your agency and your organization is the classroom for our students. So you really are teaching them every time that you're with them. So that is the classroom. This is their experience. They're learning through this experience. Oh, if you could just go back one slide, couple slides, one more. There we go. Oh, there we go, right there. Thank you. So quick raise of hands. How many people have heard of the Big 8? Raise your hand if you've heard of the Big 8. See Rachel's hand up. I can't see all of you right now, but I see Katie's hand. All right, see some hands up. Okay, wonderful. So Jennifer's hands, Danielle's. All right, wonderful. So I see some hands coming up. All right, I love that. So the Big 8, for those of us that study and are in D&I work, the Big 8 refers to socially constructed identities. Typically, there's different variations, but typically we're talking about ability, class, race, gender, religion, culture, sexual orientation, and age. So when we refer to the Big 8, we're generally referring to these socially constructed identities. Ability, we're talking about physical ability, which is sometimes visible, sometimes mental ability or mental health, which is sometimes hidden. Class, socioeconomic status, race, which is a made-up word, ethnicity, nationality, national origin. Gender, we're talking about gender identification or sex assigned at birth. Religion, we're talking about established religions. Culture, which is beliefs, traditions, customs, celebrations. Sexual orientation or sexual preferences. Age, how old you are. And as instructors in the field, we also need to think about not all of these separately, but how they are intersecting. And we need to be thinking about how all of these identities are intersecting and need to be honored in that way. The thing that I really want to that I really want to drive home here is that what we know about diversity is that diversity powers innovation. Research shows us that diversity powers innovation. So it's so powerful, and it powers the innovation in which we really want to explore. The next slide just shows keeping the big 8 in mind. In addition, students are coming to us with lots of stuff. They're coming to us with different levels of knowledge, different strengths, different abilities, different cultures, different learning styles, different skills. They're coming to us from all over the world. They're coming to us with different styles of celebrating. They're celebrating in different ways. They're talking in different ways. They're worshiping differently. All of these things shape their experiences, their thoughts and perspectives in different ways. They may act differently. They're going to behave differently. They're going to think differently. And they all fit into this field education puzzle. Okay, so I have talked long enough, and I'm going to turn it over. So this is going to get fun now. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Fletcher, who's going to take us a little bit deeper into this learning. Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to the entire field department. And thank you, Dr. Vorzan, for allowing me to partner with you all to think about some of these issues around anti-oppression, around diversity, around equity and inclusion. So we are going to talk a little further. I'm going to see if I can advance the slide. Perfect. All right. So first of all, Nicole has laid a foundation for us, and we are going to build upon the foundation that Nicole has just laid. We understand our role as field educators, and we also understand the role of the student as we engage with one another in our field relationships. Now, we recognize that as we take a deeper dive into this conversation around anti-oppression and anti-racism, that we're going to make a few assumptions. One of the primary assumptions that we're going to make is that this is a third rail conversation. What is a third rail conversation? The third rail is really about the potential deadliness or painfulness or difficulty of this conversation. It is packed with meaning, and it is pregnant with just potential misunderstanding. So I really like to say that at the outset. These conversations can be rather difficult. So I like to say that at the outset. And I'd also like to say that as we have this conversation, we may make a few missteps, right? We may say things that may offend another individual on the call. I may say something that may offend you. And I would ask that if I do, that you might grant me grace in offering me what I like to term preemptive forgiveness. And that simply means that you will make the assumption that whatever comment that I may make that may offend you did not come from a place of malice, but perhaps it came from a place of my need for more information. So I'm asking you to offer me preemptive forgiveness and anticipatory forgiveness, and I will grant you that same peace. I am also asking that as we step into this space and we have conversation with each other around these notions, that we are able to forgive ourselves for things that we might say in the midst of conversation, and that we forgive others. And lastly, I'd like to add that authentic conversations around notions of anti-oppression, anti-racism, and other concepts that we are going to discuss this afternoon take time. We've been such a long time in a place where we could not have these conversations that we have to give ourselves space, right? We have to give ourselves space to ramp up the learning curve so that we can have these conversations in such a way where they become natural. Right. So I'd like to ask everyone on the call to take a collective deep breath as we step into the space. And I'd like to say that if we fall apart during our 2 hours together, we will put ourselves back together before we say goodbye this afternoon. So with your permission, we're going to press forward with our time together. All right. As good social workers, we know that we cannot have any conversation without a little bit of theory backing up how we're going to think about a notion. And so the notion of anti-oppression and anti-racism are going to be thought about from the theoretical perspective of object relations, which is proposed to us by D.W. Winnicott. And for those of you who know me, and for those of you who have heard me give a talk before, you will know that I absolutely love D.W. Winnicott and object relations. D.W. Winnicott was a psychoanalyst who practiced a little bit after Sigmund Freud did. And he really took some of the foundational beliefs of Sigmund Freud and he massaged them and tweaked them just a little bit. And D.W. Winnicott really helped us to understand how that which is on the outside of us gets on the inside of us and becomes unconscious. It becomes an unconscious driver, really regarding how we then step into relationship with other people. So D.W. Winnicott practiced, I believe, during the Second World War. And he really developed his concepts as he watched children who were moved from the cities during the war to the countryside. As he observed these children, what he noticed was that children who were well parented tended to do better during their separation from their parents. Why was that? That was because those children had so well integrated their good enough parenting or their well parenting, so that good parenting had been integrated on the inside of them, and they were able to hold those objects, those relationships with their parents on the inside of them, and that was able to stabilize them during times of separation. So D.W. Winnicott, again, helps us to understand how that which is on the outside gets on the inside. What does that have to do with, or what does this theoretical perspective have to do with anti-oppression and anti-racism? Well, we're going to talk about that. So you and I, during our formative years, were socialized. We were socialized in our families of origin. What I like to say is that during our formative years, when we had breakfast with our parents, they sprinkled certain beliefs, values, worries, and concerns about ourselves and others right atop our breakfast cereal. They buttered our toast with these very same notions. So during everyday interactions, we were socialized to believe certain things about ourselves and certain things about others over the course of daily interactions. These interactions also occurred during our regular school day. Our socialization also occurred during story time at the library. And during bedtime, when our parents or our grandparents or our aunties or our uncles read books to us, right? So the socialization about who we were and who we were not, and who other people were and who they were not, was occurring in this rather quiet way during our formative years. And we began to understand who we were in the world and where we were placed and where we were not, and where other people were placed. So this notion of in-group and out-group was solidifying during our formative years. This other notion that you see on the screen about heuristics is really about the shortcuts that we take about people. So as the socialization was occurring, and it was at first rather mechanical, eventually it became rote, and we began to lay shortcuts down about who we were, of course, and who other people were. And because our mind has to take shortcuts, because we're taking in so much information over the course of a day, heuristics come into play. Heuristics and mental maps and schemas are really very much connected. Mental maps and schemas, a good way to describe that is once you learn how to ride a bike, you really never do forget, because a mental map or a schema about how to ride a bike is laid down in the mind or in the brain. Well, the very same thing happens about relationships, about people, believe it or not. And we never forget those, right? And these notions actually become hidden drivers about notions about other people. Right. And they're no longer in the forefront of our mind, but they become hidden, yet they still drive our behavior as we develop new relationships with other people, or as we seek not to develop new relationships with other people. Habitus is the last notion that we have over here in the corner, and that also is a part of our socialization. Habitus really has to do with the communities in which we grew up. And if you know anything about the United States, you know that most of us, not all of us, but most of us have grown up in these culturally, racially, and ethnically segregated communities, y'all. Folks live on the other side of the tracks. People who don't look like us, people who don't eat like us, people who don't necessarily think like us live in different communities. Now, I do recognize that there are some amazing communities that are integrated, and hats off and kudos to y'all who have the opportunity to live in these amazing integrated communities. So what I like to say here is that the little girl in the middle is you and I. We are so well intended, particularly as social work professionals. And what we tend to forget is that we have been socialized to think and behave in different ways about other individuals. And this is really, y'all, how racist notions and how oppressive notions become a part of us and get pressed down and really forgotten. And Dexter, our Dean Vorzon, mentioned this, that this is the little oppressor who lives in each one of us. We tend to forget about that person. But today, y'all, we're going to have the opportunity to kind of reach in and pull that person out and examine that person. And that's exactly what we want to do today, right? We know we're all well-intended, but I'm going to ask you all to take a risk with me and reach on the inside of us and examine that tiny oppressor who lives on the inside of you and I. And D.W. Winnicott helps us to do that. D.W. Winnicott said that an awareness of the unconscious, of our unconscious world is imperative, right? Especially as we go out into the world to engage with individuals who have experienced marginalization, individuals who experience oppression, individuals who experience racism, individuals who experience ableism, individuals who experience genderism, individuals who are oppressed because of their religious beliefs, individuals who are oppressed because of their class. So D.W. Winnicott said, we must become aware of our unconscious world. And in doing so, we have a better chance then of engaging with others in a way that is more meaningful and in a way that does not perpetuate further harm. And I believe as social workers, that's really what we want to do. That is really what we want to do. And our 2-hour time today is going to give us the opportunity to tap into that for just a little while. Right? So that when we leave, we can have these aha moments as we step out into the world, and we can say, you know what, wait a minute. What did I just do in that interaction with my field supervisee? What did I just do in my interaction with that particular client? What did I just say to my son or my daughter or my partner or my spouse regarding that particular community that we just drove through? So D.W. Winnicott gives us the theoretical perspective to think about how the outside gets on the inside and what we can and cannot do about it. All right. So D.W. Winnicott, object relations, helps us to think about these things. And so he really does help us to think about this notion of unconscious bias. And Nicole and I realized how we have been inundated with the notion of unconscious bias. And we recognize that you all understand what we are talking about when we talk about unconscious bias. They are these biases that have remained hidden for such a long time. And so instead of just defining unconscious bias and beating it to death, we're going to give you all an opportunity to engage around it. We know, in fact, that we are all biased. even the most well-intentioned person unwillingly, of course, allows unconscious thoughts and feelings to influence the most objective decisions that we make. So we all fall prey to our unconscious biases, primarily because they're unconscious, y'all, right? They do not live in our conscious mind. So we recognize that we are all unconscious. We are all biased to an extent. So what Nicole and I would like to give you the opportunity to do for about 5 minutes is to go into breakout rooms and discuss for just a few minutes your own biases. And what we'd like you to lean into really is when you had an aha moment. And I'm going to share one of mine. I used to live in northeastern Wisconsin, and there are 11 tribes in northeastern Wisconsin. And one of my friends, whose name is Tanya Cornelius, is a tribal member. And she and I were at a function together one Friday evening. And we were together in someone's home. It was an informal meeting. And the young people had gathered together in a room, and they were just kind of hanging out while the adults did their thing in the other room. And I just casually said to Tanya, wow, I wonder what the young people are doing in the back room. It looks like they are having a powwow. And my dear colleague kind of leaned over and looked at me, and she said, wow, Miss Diversity Lady, a powwow? And I said, oh, Tanya. She said, oh, Adrienne. I said, wow. She said, yeah, no. A powwow is a sacred gathering for Native American individuals. And so my dear colleague and friend, Tanya Cornelius, pulled my coattail and allowed me to have an aha moment about the use of that sacred terminology for that sacred event. And I had applied it to that moment that the children were having in the back room. So I'm going to ask you all for about 5 minutes to gather in groups of 3 or 4, I believe, to talk for about 5 minutes about an aha moment that you had around an unconscious bias, a microaggression. So we're going to send you all off to small groups and let you do that for about 5 minutes. Back on, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Hello.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. It's nice to see all of your faces and all of the unmuted videos. Welcome back. All right, so I'm going to ask that some of you might be willing to share your aha moments with the whole group. So I'm looking for maybe 2 groups to volunteer to share. Hi, Nikki. Hope it's okay to say hi to a few people. Good to see your face. So I'm wondering if a couple groups might be willing to share what they discussed, their aha moments. And I like to tell people, like I always have on my clinician hat. So as your videos are unmuted and I see your smiling faces, it only makes me want to call on you. Now, I'm not suggesting that you frown at me or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But I know, and like, is it Sharva, C-H-A-V-A, Shava Harris? Oh man, your smile. Oh, it just warms my heart. Do you want to share? Are you willing to share?
Sure.
Okay.
In my group, actually, I'll share my own.
Yeah.
What I was sharing was that just as a woman, one thing that I've noticed is that sometimes if I'm in a car in a parking lot, whether I'm parking or sitting, as soon as I see anyone male kind of walking by, my first instinct is lock the door.
Yeah. Yes. Good. Excellent. And so what is that about? Right. So peel back a layer of that onion for me. What is that about?
Well, I think big part of it, right? We're kind of taking in a whole lot of news, right? About all the things that happen and the dangers and, things that happen to women. I think that something that just as you were discussing earlier, it's one of those things that just gets ingrained into your mind and you're thinking about it even when you don't know you're thinking about it.
Exactly. We are socialized to believe that men are dangerous. And that as women, we have to protect ourselves. When we park our car at night, we have to park near a light. We have to take all these extra precautions, right? As women, right? Right. Thank you. Thank you for being so honest
My
and
pleasure.
authentic. Thank you. Absolutely. Good. Who else? Who else would like to share? Now no one's smiling at me, which is really sad.
I'll share mine.
Okay, perfect.
So something that one of my group members said made me think of this. I have a student who's doing her MSW from CASE this semester,
Okay.
and she is a Black woman. And
Mhm.
I've had so many of my coworkers come to me and say, she is so pleasant. She always comes and says hello. And we just love having her around because she's just so joyful. And it just made me think, because of the stereotype of Black women always being angry, would we be so, excited about her being so pleasant if it was a white woman?
Right, right. And so you already peel that back, right? So we've been socialized to believe that women of color, particularly Black women, are just like always on the defense. Like we always want to come for you, right? And so if someone meets someone who's says please and thank you and good morning, we are like, wow, look at this. The exception to the rule, right? Because we've been socialized to believe specific things about specific people. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Good, good. One more, because these are really good. These are really good. How about one more? Yep, go right ahead, Margaret.
Okay, in our group, two of us talked about anger.
Yes.
Periods of time when we would be annoyed or angry, intolerant. And then the third person in our group brought up systemic issue, which I thought was interesting. But it took me a long time to recognize where sometimes anger in relationship situations would seem to just arise, and I would have to stop myself from expressing some type of intolerance. And it had to do, I grew up in a family where there was so much diversity, and so much, there were so many splits and differences, religious, ethnic, racial, and literally, luckily I had a mother who helped me navigate that. But there were times when I just would get so angry about these microaggressions, sometimes against me, sometimes virtually I would see it against other people, but I didn't recognize, I didn't have the word microaggression.
Yes.
It wasn't talked about. I'm a senior citizen, so much of this was never talked about back then. And I could write a book, maybe someday I will, about some of those.
Yes, good, good. And so you're able to draw pull that thread from your formative years, right into the present, and it helps you to understand a little bit about microaggressions and their connection to your experience with anger. Right?
Yes, and luckily had that mother who helped us navigate what we saw, because I especially was always saying, why, and she would just get this look on her face and try to explain it in a way. She has a social work background, so she would try to explain it in a way that wouldn't make it racial, wouldn't make it prejudice against religions, but she struggled. She really struggled.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Margaret. And I even appreciate her struggle, because like we are still struggling to find the words to co-create this common language so that we can have the conversation, right? And I appreciate that she struggled through it and she was able to help you, right? So good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing such a tender part of your past. Thank you. All right, y'all. We're going to go back to our slides and we're going to continue to have more meaningful conversation around these notions. And I'm going to be handing off the conversation to Nicole, and then she's going to hand back to me shortly. So we're going to go back to our presentation, and we're going to pick up with more on unconscious bias.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. And thank you all for sharing. That's definitely helpful and enhances the conversation for sure when you all contribute. So this image here, so looking at the first row, we're talking about unconscious bias. What are looking at this, the first row, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images there. What are some things that come to mind there? And I'll share with you first. I was going through these slides with my 10-year-old daughter last night and just kind of preparing for this today. And I said to her, I said, Kinsey, look at this picture here. And I just asked her one simple question. I said, and she's 10, and I said, who do you think out of these 6 men, I said, who do you trust? Who would you trust based looking at this picture, just in these 6 men, who do you trust? And she looked at the picture and she said, Mom, I would, she didn't even skip a beat. She said, I would trust the man, the man second from the left. So the one in the suit and tie. And I wasn't surprised, right? And I said, okay. And I said, well, why would you trust that man? And without skipping a beat, she said, because it looks like a man that would work with you. Looks like a man that you would work with. And to me, that moment that she said that, I felt very proud because I do work with 2 Black men who wear suits and ties with me, right? Dr. Miller, Dr. Wilkes. And she has that experience already seeing 2 strong, intelligent Black men who her mom are working with. And I did not have that experience growing up. Okay, I'm going to share I'm going to be vulnerable here with 56 of my closest friends here. Dr. Fletcher talked about living on the other side of the tracks. And, I did not grow up in an integrated community. I grew up in a suburb where everyone was white, pretty much everyone was white. 99% of the people were white. And that is probably one of the reasons why I started really studying and engaging in this work 20 years ago. I did not have a Black professor until college, until undergrad. And so the fact that through my 10-year-old's eyes, she already sees that a Black man is in power is something that just really kind of took me back last night as I was thinking that. But what are some ideas and what are some things that you're thinking of when you're looking at this? And she did say to me afterwards, by the way, she said, well, Mom, these are all the same people. These are all the same people, just dressed differently. So what's the big deal? And so that is so true. I mean, these are all the same people, they're dressed differently. So we're thinking about hairstyles, we're thinking about clothing, we're thinking about what makes us think differently about the same person based on their appearance, our background, our cultural environment, our personal experiences, all are shaping the way that we are creating these unconscious biases. It's these quick judgments and these assessments that we are quickly making that are influencing our perceptions. So thinking about our students, for instance, during the interview process, for example, are we treating them the same? Are we treating them differently based on how they're dressed, how they appear, the way they talk, the way they look? Are we offering them an internship based on those things? So these are just some things to think about. Any comments, anything to think about on this slide? Any thoughts?
Unfortunately, when I look at the slides, can you guys hear me? It's Darlene Mason. Okay.
Yes,
When I
Darlene.
look at the slides, I get a different feeling or person. I can put a personality on each person, unfortunately, just based on how they look. Like the guy with the right here with the scarf on his head, I would think he was a gangbanger. And the guy with the hood on, he looks very suspicious to me. And I would think, oh my God, he's up to something. He's up to no good, because why isn't he showing his face? So yes, and I can tell you a story about each one based on how they're dressed. And I think that's why I've always was told to always look your best. It doesn't matter, because people are going to judge you based on how you look. Unfortunately, that's our society. I mean, if I walk around with short shorts and, my breast out, people are going to think I'm a hoochie. On the other hand, if I have on a nice dress that's covered myself, then I look more like a professional, respectable woman. That's just, chime in on that because that's our life.
Yeah. So Darlene, if I can jump right in there, if that's okay, Nicole,
Absolutely.
it is true that we do in a nanosecond create a narrative about the other, literally in a nanosecond. And research tells us that the two categories that we are making on which we are making decisions about people, the two primary categories, believe it or not, are warmth and competence. How warm a person is and how competent they are. Those are the two. Now, it's not conscious. It's all unconscious. So we quickly decide about the individual on the first row is the same person, and the individual on the second row who is just dressed differently. We decide very quickly how warm she is and how competent she is based on what she has on. We decide the same thing with the gentleman on the first row, based on what he has on, how warm he is and how competent he is, right? And so what we have the opportunity to do is to slow our thinking down a little bit and wonder, right? We want to pull the curtain back a little bit, as it were. And I recognize it's tough work, right? We do want to keep ourselves safe. So I'm not asking anybody to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, I would never ask anybody to do that because we do have to keep ourselves safe. And at the same time, we want to recognize the complexity of getting to know folks, right? So it is such a delicate dance. It is such a delicate dance. And we welcome other comments. And Darlene, I welcome your comments on those notions of warmth and competence as well.
Yeah, I believe that you're absolutely right. But a lot of times I think we judge them so quickly, we don't give ourselves a chance to see their warmth and their confidence and their competence. And if we do see it, we say, oh, our aha moment in the back of our mind, he's not what I thought. He is totally different. He's just, dressing down and, he's, was going to a baseball game or something and he is warm and competent, but I didn't see that when I first looked at him. But as soon as he opened his mouth, I saw intelligence. I saw a whole different narrative, but I had made him something in my mind, and you're right. If I'm not aware, I'll run with that. But like you say, if I can take a step back and and think about what I'm thinking about, I can, stop some of that prejudgment.
If I can jump in here, I'm just so appreciating this conversation. And when I saw the topic, I said, I have to make time to be a part of this. And I agree with all the comments. And in terms of adding some complexity to this, when I was a psychology state student many, many decades ago, I was taught that people judge you by three things: the way you look, what you say, and how you say it. And the physical, yes, definitely, we all make assumptions about the other person. And I think that's part of our common makeup as individuals. At the same time, too, men are allowed certain privileges or allowances based on how they look versus women, right? And we are all kind of socialized to these gender narratives, these gender scripts, these racial scripts. And when we look at intersectionality, white men versus black men and so on. But a white male walks into a room automatically, even if they're dressed in cargo shorts, casual, they are given certain allowances and they walk into that room with a certain amount of positive capital, positive social capital, positive stereotypes. A black male walks into that room in cargo shorts, right? Certain assumptions are automatically made, certain stereotypes that are already attributed to that person. And that's why, in organizations, you would find people of color. Nicole mentioned two colleagues that she worked with have to overpresent because they are not taken seriously from the get-go. So they have to overpresent in terms of dress and representation and speech. So Darlene, what you're saying is true. I totally agree with that, but I think we have to look at the nuances. And, you know, myself as a Black male, my mom socialized me to cultural pride, but she also socialized me as someone who grew up in the 1930s that whiteness was superior, right? And I think we all internalize these scripts around gender, around race, around sexual orientation, around size, around ability, how we assess individuals. So I'm hearing we give ourselves space to be human, and at the same time, we also give ourselves the opportunity to challenge ourselves and to learn, and to look at the complexity that's inherent in all of us.
Very nice,
you,
Dexter.
Dee-Hon.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. This is great conversation. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to another deep topic. We're going to move a little bit more towards equity, equality, and justice now. Some of you may have seen, we can go ahead and advance the slides a couple. Some of you may have seen this slide before, these images before. So we're just going to take a couple of moments here to talk about this. So the top left-hand image is giving, so we're talking about equity versus equality versus justice, okay? So the top image, for example, is, you can see that they, the people are given the same support. So all the people are given the same support, even though they have different needs, right? So the person who can see over the fence is giving the block of support, even though that person really does not need that, because they can already see over the fence, they can see the game. So that is equality, right? Everybody is giving the same support. Equality does give everyone the same support, but it only works if everyone needs the same thing. So in that first image, not everybody needs that support, right? Because they all need something different. They don't need the same thing. So thinking about your students, your students need the same thing in field education? Do all your students need the same thing? Seeing some heads shake, no. No, your students do not need the same thing. They're all individualized people. They do not need the same thing. They all have different needs, right? So they're going to need different things. They're going to need different supports. They're not all going to need one block. Some are going to need no blocks. Some are going to need one block. Some are going to need 2 blocks. The second image is showing different supports given for different needs. That sounds a little bit better, right? Now everyone can see the Guardians win a game. Everyone's happy, right? Everyone's treated equally. We must first ensure, though, that equity, we must ensure equity before we can ensure equality, right? So we're getting better, but we're just not quite there yet. What does it look like if the system barrier is removed? So looking at the third picture, looking at if that those wooden planks are removed of the fence, the wooden plank fence is removed completely. And you put another fence in there. You put a steel fence in there so everybody can see without any supports. Justice is when all 3 can see the game with any support or accommodation because the inequity was addressed. The system barrier has been removed, okay? So when we're thinking about our students, it's good to think about promoting equity, but also we need to be thinking about what each individual student needs. So we may need to get rid of the blocks. We may need to tear down the fence, and we may need to build metal fences that will create justice. Okay. All right, our next slide. I got this image from the National Equity Project. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I really, really love this, and I wanted to share this with you. So if this image is talking about creating leaders and children to achieve equity in education, but we can substitute the children for our students. So what they do is they're talking about to achieve equity in education, We must develop leaders who can transform our institutions by eliminating inequitable practices and cultivate the unique gifts, talents, and interests of every child, we'll say of every student, so that success and failure are no longer predictable by students' identity, racial, cultural, economic, or any other social factor. So I just really loved that, and I wanted to share that. And I encourage you to check out some of their resources if you have time. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Adrienne. We're going to talk about anti-oppression, and then we're going to go into a breakout room and talk a little bit more about this. So Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Nicole. So thank you for giving us that, those examples of equity and social justice. So yes, we're going to think about anti-oppression right now. And this word, believe it or not, is not a new word, but we don't use it as often as we use anti-racism. Anti-Blackness is also, it is a relatively new term. So what we're going to do right now is to go back into our breakout rooms, groups of 3 or 4. We're going to get folks in them probably a little quicker. And I want y'all to have conversations around the meanings of each of these words and the experience of the lived experience of anti-oppression in field, the lived experience of anti-racism in field, and the lived experience of anti-Blackness in field. So you may spend just a sliver of time defining the term and then actually applying it to the field experience. All right, so you're just going to take a little bit of time, define the term. What is it? We need to know what it is. You have to co-create a common language. And then I want you to think about how it is experienced in field, experience with your field supervisee. So we're going to send you off into breakout rooms so that you all can take the time to do that. And then we're going to come back and have a little bit of conversation around these notions. All right.
How much time did you say we have?
Oh, can we do maybe 6 minutes? Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. All righty. So in order to move things forward, I want to ask you, a few of you, as you come back into the space, I'd like to ask a few of you if you might be willing to share your notions around definitions of anti-racism, anti-oppression, and anti-Blackness. And then we're going to talk about your experience with particularly anti-oppression in your field engagement. So who'd like to go first? Who'd like to share how you defined? Let's just start with anti-oppression. Anybody want to take that albatross on? Any takers?
I'll try. It's
Okay.
Darlene. Well, one of the persons in our breakout session, she defined it as actively keeping another down. So you're actively oppressing that person knowingly. Is not unconscious at all. So you're knowingly doing things to oppress
Okay.
that person.
Okay. And so I'm going to make the assumption that anti-oppression is knowingly doing the opposite. Okay.
Knowingly doing something that's not going to be helpful to the person.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Good. Someone define anti-racism for me.
I'll take a stab. So
all right, Jennifer, cool.
I think, when I think of anti-racism, it's not necessarily just being an ally, but it's being like active in combating the systemic issues with racism.
Perfect. And Jennifer, can you give us one example of how one might be anti-racist? Just one example of an activity, a way to ally. Yep.
what activity with your, so I mean, I'm just thinking like if, I mean, it could be something as simple as if, you have a family member that is, having a conversation and just, using, certain language or something and just like speaking up and not just letting it, ignoring it and actually doing something to change their thinking.
Cool. Cool. And what, speaking up and what, speaking up can sound terribly frightening. So one of the things that I know we can do instead of calling someone out, and I know all of y'all know this, but I'm just going to go ahead and touch it. Instead of calling someone out to say, you know what, that was awful what you just did. What we can do is call someone in and say, you know what, I'm really curious as to why you use that terminology versus this one. We can call folks in. Right. And we can wonder with them, which invites them into the space. Right. So we can call folks in versus calling them out. And Jennifer, so that's excellent. That's excellent. We don't ignore it and we don't have to call them out, but we can call them in. Perfect. So we have this notion of anti-oppression, which is doing activities which willfully no longer oppress or no longer press down, and also activities which no longer are racist. We can call people in, we don't ignore, and we don't have to call them out. Anti-Blackness is a little different, right? So let's define it. What is anti-Blackness? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
I will, Dr. Fletcher.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you. Just writing down all of your gems and wisdom here on my notepad here. But so I actually did research on this for you, Dr. Fletcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that I had never heard the term before I was asked to research it. And it was a very uncomfortable thing to research. Because the definition that I came to through my research on what anti-Black racism is that it is the belief that Black people are less than human. And it was a rationalization or a justification for slavery and how people could keep human beings, in those kinds of conditions as the only way that you could really do it is if you did not believe that they were human beings. And that has kind of carried forth in the way that our laws and our systems and our socialization, all the way up until present day, you can kind of see the line because we've never dealt with it or confronted it or tried to resolve it. So
perfect. So Sarah, you were probably one of the best people on the call to answer that because you did have to take a deep dive into that. And Sarah, and for the rest of the folks on the call, we can encapsulate the notion of anti-Blackness in this sentence. This is not my original line. It is a title of a New York Times article. It was not racism that killed George Floyd or that lynched George Floyd. It was anti-Black racism that killed George Floyd, right? It is this notion that Black people are less than human, right? And it is not something that is easy to sit with. As Sarah just so poignantly said, it is not something that is easy to sit with. Right. So thank you, Sarah, for your authenticity and bringing that to the fore. All right, so here's what I'd like us to grapple with really soon, and I'm looking at the clock and I see it's 1:31 and we're going to move things along. Nicole, I promise we're going to move things along. Here's what I want y'all to tell me now, really quickly, from your experience and field. Are there areas where you have been able to apply anti-oppression, anti-racism? And are there areas in field where you have seen stark examples of anti-Blackness and areas where you know that your agency has to take corrective action? So I've thrown a lot at you. You can touch areas of anti-oppression. Wow, we really saw us doing anti-oppression over here, and this is what it looked like. And we are really working on anti-oppression over here, and this is what it looks like in our agency. And much to our dismay, we saw anti-Blackness over here in our agency, but we are taking corrective action in this way. Anybody want to step to the fore? Margaret, I see your hand and I see you talking and you are muted. You got to unmute.
This is Shelby. I actually have an example.
Okay, Shelby.
Of something.
And then Margaret. Margaret, we'll come right back to you. Okay.
That's fine.
Perfect. Go ahead, Shelby.
So when I had first started taking students for CASE, I actually had to catch myself because I had noticed that with my intern, I almost went into mom mode and was almost oppressing her because of her age. So, you know, I have a 10-year-old and it was just my nature, and we were in an inpatient hospital where things can get pretty dangerous, to kind of keep her from being able to take on certain patients or get into certain conversations out of, you know, my own need to protect her unconsciously. It's wild because I'm now in a new facility as a program manager, and she's actually in the same facility as another program manager. So to see this intern that I was like almost coddling because of that age, and you know how she presented herself as young and new and green, to see her, you know, now as a colleague is bizarre, and it's phenomenal, and I'm very proud of her. But I had to catch myself, you know, unconsciously oppressing her in that way.
Right. And you're talking about it from a paternalistic perspective, right? I have to take care of you, right? And it is so unconscious. Right. Good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that example. Perfect. Margaret, what is your example?
Well, mine was agency based in there too, and it's with a subcontract that we do. And it's the same agency, so I have to figure out how to address it. One is we set up a pilot group program. These are middle school students.
Okay.
And we carefully selected the students for the group. And it's a small group. It was a small group, and 3 were Black and 1 is white. And I was challenged on that because 3 were Black and 1 was white. To me, it was based on ages. It was based on the mix of what their needs were for the group.
Okay.
But when the issue was raised, well, you have 3 Black and 1 white student in that group. I was like, so what? You know, but the school was raising that as an issue. And I didn't know how to address that. Now, my student hasn't heard about that and hasn't been involved in that. But literally, I mean, to me, it was like, so what? You know, what difference does that make?
Right.
Which this is a pilot group. We're looking for certain things.
Right.
Racial composition wasn't an issue.
No. Right.
And the other same subcontract, same I don't want to name the agency that we subcontract with, but it has to do with auditory perception issues. And I deal with special ed, and it's multidisciplinary, you know, educators, psychologists, social worker, the whole bit, speech therapists, occupational therapists, and nobody gets auditory discrimination issues, auditory perception issues. When there's an impairment in that area, nobody gets it. They discriminate against the child, they discriminate against the family, even though that is listed on the IEP as a major problem. And they keep going after the parents and the child for not being able to do things that they can't do.
Right.
Because the accommodations aren't there, you know? So anyway, I get frustrated because I have a hard time with confrontation.
Sure.
And my student and I are going to have to deal with, how do we address this? I haven't done that yet. This is the orientation. So you could help me with that one, Jody, wherever she is.
Right. So and I'm sure Jody will be able to help you work through how to manage that. And, you know, the piece that you mentioned first, where you have 3 Black students and 1 white student, one of the questions we can simply ask is, would this have been an issue if there had been 3 white students and 1 Black student? Probably not. It would not have been raised, right? So Margaret, that's where we can just wonder out loud with the individuals who are asking us the question. So I wonder if this would have been an issue if there had been 3 white students and 1 Black student. And of course, there wouldn't have been, and perhaps then one can move on, right? So thank you for bringing both of those, and be sure to bring up the other piece with Jody. All right. So we're going, in the interest of time, y'all, we're going to go ahead and go back to our slide presentation. And I'm going to do something very quickly. I want to take a little bit of time, but quickly, to address anti-oppressive social work or anti-oppressive social practice. And I want to just give you all a thumbnail sketch of what it really means for us as social work practitioners. I want to tell you that it's been around since the 1970s. And I want to tell you that the work that I am citing is the scholar's name is Zhang. And she wrote this paper on anti-oppressive social work in 2018. And according to Zhang, anti-oppressive social work practice has 3 tenets. The first tenet is really identity. The second is authenticity. And the third is then resistance. So identity, the first tenet of anti-oppressive social work practice, is really about how you see yourself as an anti-oppressive social work practitioner. It's about how you identify yourself. And it's about your reflexive view of yourself. And so it's about you excising yourself from the dominant discourse that produces and sustains inequality and marginalization. So as social workers, we have to identify ourselves in such a way where we separate ourselves from the dominant discourses that are producing, reproducing, and sustaining inequality and marginalization. That means we have to recognize the systems in which we work as social workers. And we have to consciously excise ourselves from those. And we have to recognize ourselves as doing something or beginning to do something differently. So that's the first leg of the journey of becoming an anti-oppressive social worker. So that's the first piece. The second piece is authenticity. In order to be an authentic social worker who is working in anti-oppressive social work practice, we have to recognize that we are intersectional beings. We have to recognize that we are either male or female or non-binary. We have to recognize that we are people of color or white or indigenous or Asian or Latina, or whatever ethnicity we connect with. We have to recognize all of those pieces, and we have to see ourselves as, and all of our intersectional markers. So we have to be our authentic selves in our fullness, right? So we have to be our authentic selves with all of our markers. So first of all, we have to know our identity, right? And we have to excise ourselves from the dominant discourse. And then we have to recognize who we are as intersectional beings. And then the last piece is to become involved in actions that push against the dominant ideology. So actions which help us to take a stand in opposition to the beliefs and ideologies which are a part of the system. So anti-oppressive work in social work is a lot of work, right? So those 3 prongs exist. And if you want more information on that, I can send you a really quick PowerPoint that I put together, and I'm happy to send that to you, Nicole, so you can push that out to other folks, because anti-oppressive social work really does have tenets connected with it. So I just wanted to really share those pieces with you. All right, so self-assessment, y'all. Here is where the work comes in. What can you do about all of these pieces? All right, first of all, we're going to locate where we are on the map. Where are you? We have to become aware of our own stuff. If we are going to mess around in the lives of other people, we have to know where we are. We have to know where we are regarding racism, regarding classism, regarding ableism, regarding sexism, regarding heterosexism. The 2 books which are listed on the screen are amazing books, which will help us along in our process. One is written by Jane Hill, the late Jane Hill, I should say, and it's called The Everyday Language of White Racism. It is a very dense text, but it is an exceedingly informative text. If you can still find them, they are in print. They're sometimes hard to find, but you can find them. I actually think I may have a PDF that I can send to you. So if you're interested in this book, please let me know if you can't find it out there in the world. The other book, which is a relatively new book, is written by Isabel Wilkerson, who will in fact be on CASE's campus in June. I don't know if any more tickets are available, but she will be speaking in June at the Maltz. Her book is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent. And in Caste, she really leans into the notion of caste over racism. Terribly informative, and we should really be using the word caste versus racism. So we have to become aware of our own stuff. That's job one. We have to be self-reflexive individuals. All right, everybody take a deep breath. All right, here's one of the things that we can do in order to get in touch with where we are with many of these isms, the big 8. You and I can have a mindful day. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to institute this notion of a mindful day is to get an accountability partner. All right, I want everybody just to take a second right now to think of someone that they trust. Everybody, think of somebody that you trust. You need an accountability partner. Really quickly. All right, so that first person who popped into your head, I don't want you to push them away. All right, okay, everybody has a person in their head, an accountability partner. So here's what you're going to do with this accountability partner. The first thing you're going to do is to have a mindful day. Saturday is a great day to have a mindful day. So when you go out into the world tomorrow, when you start to run your errands, when you start to do your chores out in the yard, when you go to the library, when you go to your place of worship, either on Saturday or Sunday, I want you to notice who you gravitate toward while you're out in the world. I want you to notice whether you lock your car door or not. I want you to notice whether you like hold your purse a little closer to you or what have you when you walk toward certain people. I want you to notice who you smile at and who you don't smile at. I want you to reflect on your day-to-day decisions about other people. You're going to have a mindful day, right? And then I want you to record your pivotal moments. Yes, I really, really, really do want you to write them down. I want you to begin to really tap into those aha moments where you say, oh my goodness, I can't believe I really did that. I can't believe I did that. So I want you, and Jennifer, I love your smile because I can see you. I want you to really begin to write down those moments when you notice yourself either shying away from others or walking toward others. So I want you to record all of these pivotal moments. And then what you're going to do is to take that journal or a page from your journal, and I want you to share it with that accountability partner. Like, yes, I want you to give it to them. And I want them to look at it. I want them to take the time to say, this is really interesting, right? I want you to give your accountability partner permission to be honest with you. And I want you and them to have some meaningful conversation around these notions, particularly around the big 8. So like you saw a hearing impaired person and you like started to talk louder as if they were suddenly going to be able to understand you if you talk louder, what have you, right? So this is going to be an opportunity for you to really lean into some of these notions, and you're going to slow things down by watching yourself. This is what self-reflexivity is really about. So slowing down and paying attention is one of the primary ways that we can begin to mitigate our own isms, right? And in mitigating our own isms, we can pass this information on to our supervisees as they go out to do the work of engaging with their client populations. So this helps us, and then we are able to pass this information on to the individuals that we work with. I see that it is 1:46, and I realize that I ran through these things very quickly, but I'm going to hand off to Nicole, and I think she's going to hand off to me really quickly, and we're going to start to tie things up really tightly for you all, and we're going to say goodbye by 2 o'clock. So Nicole, I'm going to pass this slide off to you.
Thank you, Adrian. Dr. Fletcher, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
so now we're going.
before you go on.
Oh,
Jennifer
sorry.
has her hand raised.
Thank you, Lori.
Go ahead.
Go, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to ask a question about the accountability partner. And if this person, if you have any recommendations, if it should not be someone who, for example, you're questioning, one of your biases or something. For example, like I know with African-American persons of color, you don't it's our job to learn about ourselves and not put that on them to teach us. So example for if I did this activity, should I not ask someone of, color if the situation was related to that?
Yeah. So Jennifer, that's a really good question. And I'm just going to simply say it depends. I'm going to say it depends. Like if you already have a bud who is a person of color and y'all are already close and you're in a relationship like that, look, I got to tell you, I go to my colleagues who I'm already close with, who I know that I can lean into and they can lean into me. I have no trouble going to them.
Okay. Thank you.
If that makes sense. So it depends. It absolutely depends. It depends on the current nature of your relationship. And if you're already deep like that, look, I go back to the well. I also believe in doing my work, but I also believe in going back to the well when I can.
Thank you.
Excellent question. And I see that Janet's hand is up too. Hi, Janet. How you doing?
Sorry, I got stuck in the court on another issue. So
that's okay. Hey.
My question is about the transgender issue and the pronoun issue and how that connects in the social work, because there seems to be a war brewing.
Okay.
And in regards to it, there is a whole issue of whether the transgender issue is really a mental health issue or is it a civil rights issue? And if it's a mental health issue, are we addressing the mental health issue with the or if it's a civil rights issue, then there's a different approach. And there's not a lot of real discussion and training on how to deal with gender dysphoria in the world, and then in comparison to the issue with it being a civil rights matter.
Yeah. So Janet, I think you just really impressed upon Nicole the next training that needs to occur in field. And I think you are teasing out some very important strands that we need to lean into, like gender dysphoria may exist in the DSM, correct? And then we know that individuals are in fact transgender and are not experiencing a mental health crisis, right? And so we want to make sure we do not couple things where we don't conflate things where they are not connected. So I think it would be terribly important for us to lean into correct understanding of what is going on when an individual is trans and what is going on when an individual is experiencing dysphoria in that area. And so, Nicole, I see that as an area where a really robust training could take place.
I just wrote that down.
Yeah.
So
So Janet, that is an
much.
excellent question. And that is an area where I believe we should pay very, very, very careful attention. Very careful attention. And I wish we had the time to lean into that right now. And I also wish that, with that, we had experts on the line who could help us to tease out. But I know that we don't want to conflate, right? Mental health issues with an individual who is trans, right? And is perfectly healthy from a mental wellness standpoint. Excellent question. Excellent question. Yes. Good. Good.
Your questions are great, so keep them coming. What other questions you have?
Okay, good.
That's what this space is for. You can all get the slides later. So any other questions? Okay.
All right.
All right, so now we're going to move into, I know I'm going to be cognizant of time here. I've got nine minutes, and I want to give you time to complete your post-evaluation or your post-test for your CEUs and your evaluation as well. So, whoops, did we lose our screens here? So what we want to do is, oh, go ahead, Angie.
Sorry, I was going to say I stopped sharing so that I could share the links in the chat. Do you want to continue to share the slides?
Yeah, we can share just for a couple more minutes, and then then we can go to the link to those links. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can continue to, have these conversations, have these tough conversations with our students. It's not going to be easy. So what we can do is, if you want a starting point, what I would suggest is bringing up a current event. If it's difficult to start these conversations with your students, say, for example, during supervision, start with a current event, right? We could talk about Boston or Buffalo, for example. That could be a starting point. Also, trickling down, thinking about how the engagement process, Adrienne, it's okay if I just take this over real quick. Okay, so thinking about the engagement process and how it trickles down. So you, as a field instructor or task supervisor, really have the, I don't want to say power, but you have the influence to really talk with your students and be a positive influence to how you are teaching the students. And then the students then passes that on to the client and the community. So it's a trickle down effect. So the more positive and the more comfortable and the more you embrace and cook these conflicts and have these conversations with your students, it then goes into the community, and then it goes into the clients in the community, and that's where the change can happen. I want to talk briefly about the next slide with, remember I showed this in the beginning about when we're talking about applying equity-focused strategies in field education. So when we're looking, for example, during the interview process, this is a great way to model equity-focused teaching practices. You can apply all of these things in these different areas of times when you are engaging with the students. So for example, when we're thinking about the Big 8, when we're interviewing students for placement, are we thinking about whether or not there is wheelchair accessibility? Are we considering the fact that students may have difficulty accessing Wi-Fi when we're interviewing them remotely? Do we have a policy in place for students who need accommodations? Is our organization familiar with ADA? When we're onboarding students, are we thinking about, are we describing the culture or the culture of the organization to them? Are we scheduling supervision times with them when they need to have their prayer times? Are we using and sharing our pronouns with them? When we're writing their evaluations and their assessment, are we using their correct pronouns? Are we letting our own bias get in the way when we are assessing the students? So these are all things to think about and ways to really apply equity-focused strategies in our field education. So really kind of just lead by example, be comfortable sharing your gender, your identity, your gender expression, your intersectionality. If you feel comfortable sharing different, your positionality statement, your organization mission statement, or if you have a D&I statement, share those things as well. What do we have next? Structured interactions. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but really looking at creating invitations and norms for participation, giving the students options for engagement, and really thinking about ways to really listen and engage with students is really important. We have 5 minutes here. So these are also just some other options for structured interactions during supervision. Self-awareness is the first step. That is really key in all of this. Really letting that dialogue going deeper, move in and out, share the airtime, listen respectfully, step outside of your comfort zone and be fully present. Diversity and inclusion, you guys all know this. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And I was in a training this week, and they even took it one step further and saying, thinking about what music is playing at the party as well. I thought that was kind of cute. I want to leave you with a quote from Lama Rod Owens, who says, "There is no liberation without practice." We need to continue to practice this every single day. Diversity is an everyday assignment, right? It just doesn't end. So I'm going to leave you with that. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. The last 2 hours have been so insightful. Thank you so much for being here. This is your CEU post-test. This is approved for supervision and ethics. Your evaluation link is there. And also, we are always in need for external field instructors, and those are field instructors who are not associated with a particular agency, but sometimes we have an agency who does not have a social worker on staff, and we need a field instructor for those particular sites. If you are interested in being one of those people, please fill out that application, and we would love to contact you and hear from you. So thank you all so much for being here with us. We really, truly appreciate it, and really hope that you enjoy your weekend. And thank you for this partnership so very much.
Nicole, will we make sure everyone gets the slides? Some folks said they could not access them. We'll make sure that folks get them.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not available yet. That's correct.
Oh,
we
gotcha.
will
Okay.
actually, where they will be, central place, they will be on our website, on our resource page, so everybody can access them there.
People were
And-
talking about
and I
doing
am-
the post-test. That's what they were talking about. They
Yeah,
can't
so
access.
I am seeing that those links don't work, so I'm gonna find them from in a different spot. So if you could just give me one moment here.
Oh, the post-test links are not working?
Yeah, they're not populating to the. Okay, so here is the, whoops. Here then is the post-test. There, and then I will.
Yes, we can. Email them to you. People have 2 o'clock appointments, so we can send that to those participants.
And you all are welcome to stay. We will move you to a breakout room so you can all stay and complete your evaluation there if you'd like.
I have a student coming right now, so will I be able to do this later?
Yeah, you can copy, you can click on the link and keep it open on your browser.
Okay, because
That's
I'm going to
fine.
be
Yep.
tied up for a while.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna do mine later too. I gotta run to a meeting.